What is up, and welcome back to Beyond the Arc with Brandon Silvers. As always, I am your host, Brandon Silvers, talking about the WNBA awards today. A lot of new subscribers here. Apparently, Coach Johnson gets the people going. He will be back on soon enough. Welcome to you. I think the people who have been here a while will agree that you are in the right place. The way I cover sports as well as the sports I cover varies, so if you're here, you should find plenty that interests you. I know a good bit, and the most important thing I know is that I don't know everything, so if you can teach me something, by all means, drop it in the comments. Respectfully, of course. If you're here and you haven't subscribed yet, what are you waiting on? Okay, with the Olympic break, it feels like a good time to take a breath and look at the award situation for the WNBA. It's been an incredible season so far. There were some very high expectations heading into this season, a lot of pressure to perform for all these new eyeballs, and this season has done that and more. We see that not only in the race for the playoffs, where you could argue that 5 teams have looked championship worthy, but also in how the race for the individual awards has shaped up. So let's look at those and see if we can figure out who will win them when the season resumes. Let's start with an easy one right off the bat, the MVP race, which hasn't been much of a race at all. A'ja Wilson is running away with this one. This could end up being the best individual season in the history of the WNBA. She's currently on pace to break the single season record for points per game, has a shot to do it with rebounds per game as well, and spoiler alert, will factor heavily into the Defensive Player of the Year conversation later in the episode. And as always, the numbers only tell part of the story. What makes this season so unique to me is that A'ja has been at the top of the league for a while now. She's a 2-time MVP, and you could have made a hell of a case for her to win it last year too. When you reach that level, how do you go even higher? Off the top of your head, how many basketball players, men or women, have managed to be at the top of the sport and improved even more? Normally, when you're at the top of your sport, you're maxed out potential-wise, and it's about maintaining that level of play. But somehow, A'ja has managed to improve. So what are we seeing? Offensively, she's always had nice touch and a nice mid-range game. That's looking even smoother. Her dream shake into a turnaround jumper is the best since Hakeem himself. She's toyed around with extending her range out to the three-point line before, hitting 37% of her 2.3 attempts per game in 2022, but went away from that last year, only attempting 29 threes all year long. Well, she's back to firing them up again, and while her volume isn't Arike level by any means, she's hitting nearly 40% of her 1.7 attempts per game, which means at 6'4", she's a legitimate, explosive 3-level scorer. Only a handful of players in the history of the WNBA can say that. Outside of her scoring, she's also shown off some real playmaking skills. She's able to bring the ball up the court and initiate the offense, but they can also put her in inverted pick and roll actions where guards come to set the screen for her and let her go to work off the dribble from the perimeter. And again, we'll talk defense in a bit, but she's even improved there as a 2-time Defensive Player of the Year award winner. She's talked about how she's understanding that side of the game better as far as what offenses are trying to do against the aces. You see it both in the stat sheet, where her improved anticipation has her well on track to set career highs in blocks and steals, but also just watching the game. You can see the command she has on that side of the ball. So yeah, the MVP award is A'ja's. The only bit of mystery left is whether or not it'll be unanimous, and it absolutely should be. She's putting together one of the greatest basketball resumes ever. If you aren't tapped into what she's doing, fix that. Now, if we existed in some other terrible dimension where A'ja didn't exist, Sabrina Ionescu would have a strong case. The Liberty have been the best team in the W all year, and a big reason for that has been her improved play. She's leading them in scoring at 19.8 points per game, and the way she's been able to score, specifically adding in a nice little floater to her arsenal, has opened things up for both herself and her teammates. Plus, even with her increased aggressiveness as a scorer, she's still out there creating for others too as a passer, and her defense is what it is, but she has been serviceable this season. Napheesa Collier has missed some time with injury, but you'd have to consider her as well. The Lynx have been at the top of the league, and it helps that everyone on her team is somehow the greatest three-point shooter in the world, but also Napheesa is a big reason why they get such great looks. She's incredibly consistent, a walking 20 and 10 night in and night out, along with elite defense. My super sleeper pick is Kennedy Carter. Record obviously matters in MVP talks, so this guy fighting for that last playoff spot doesn't do her any favors. Also, she came off the bench to start the year. But if we take most valuable player literally, how many players provide more value to their team than she does? She's Chicago's best and most consistent scorer. As a starter, she's putting up 21 points per game on 52% shooting as a small guard. When they need a bucket, she gets one. When they need to feed Cardoso or Reese, she's the best on that team at post-entry passes. She defends, she rebounds. I love watching her play, and she is such an important player for that team. Speaking of the sky, let's move on to the most competitive race and the one with the most eyeballs on it, Rookie of the Year. You've got Kennedy's teammate Angel Reese going up against Caitlin Clark of the Indiana Fever. If you can manage to block out as much of the noise as possible and just pay attention to what they're doing as rookies in the league, you are getting quite a show. I'm not going to rehash the entire history because you should know it unless you've been living under a rock, in which case email me and I'll break it down for you. But their stories have been intertwined, for better or worse, for the past 2 years. It seemed like everyone thought their stories would finally diverge here, with Caitlin being seen as an instant contributor and generational talent, and Angel being considered more of a long-term project, but here we are. I can't think of a Rookie of the Year race this close, particularly one that was close because both players were playing at such a high level. It reminds me of last year's MVP race. There are so many reasons why rookies should not come in and perform well immediately. Not only do they come straight from a long college season and have to start playing, but there's no summer league, no real lengthy training camp to get comfortable with their teammates or the playbook, no time to prepare themselves physically. Coaches don't get a chance to figure out how to use them best. Instead, they're thrown into the fire and have to figure things out as they go. Typically what you see, the ones who do get to play, they have their weaknesses exposed and exploited, and that has been the case with these two, as incredible as they've been. Caitlin's had turnover issues. Her shot hasn't been particularly consistent. She doesn't have a mid-range game to fall back on. These were problems in college, but how many teams had the talent to take advantage of them? In the WNBA, every team does. Same thing with Angel. She wasn't a scoring threat outside of the paint. In the paint, she wasn't always consistent with her finishing ability. She worked around it for the most part at LSU, but this is the WNBA. But to me, it doesn't really matter. They've both had to adjust at this level, but that's typical. And on top of that, I'm not incredibly concerned about weaknesses as rookies since we're already seeing improvement and the fixes aren't rocket science. Caitlin's turnovers can be separated into 2 categories for me: chemistry-based and self-imposed. The chemistry-based ones are just a matter of getting on the same page as her teammates. That's going to be a two-way street. She's going to continue to learn where they like to receive the ball. They're going to continue to learn how she likes to deliver it. She's a unique playmaker, so you do have an added degree of difficulty with that. But again, we've already seen improvements there. These self-imposed turnovers are the ones that only Caitlin can fix. These are the ones that happen due to needing to get stronger physically and tighten up her dribble. Again, we saw this in college. Think back to the national championship game. Stealing the ball off a live dribble is one of the hardest things to do as a defender. It's normally a sign that someone is being sloppy with their handle. That's something we've seen from Caitlin. However, that's something that can be fixed. Same story with her shot. She's used to having the green light to shoot herself into a rhythm. She still has that green light, but it's not quite as green as it was at Iowa. In my experience, that's a mental adjustment more than anything. Same story with Angel. Yes, she needs to finish around the hoop better. That's usually a strength, touch, and taking your time problem. However, the criticism she gets for rebounding her own misses is weird for me. Every player misses shots. Give me the ones who can rebound those misses and score. To me, that's people not knowing what they're talking about because they're framing something as a weakness when really they're highlighting a skill. Same as some of Caitlin's turnovers. Yes, 95% of players wouldn't have turned the ball over trying to make that pass, but that's because 95% of players wouldn't have had the court vision to even know that pass was even available to attempt. Weaknesses getting exposed is the name of the game for rookies, but these two are doing special things. They're out here breaking records, whether it's Caitlin and the single game assist record or Angel's double-double streak. So who will be the Rookie of the Year? I feel like it's switched up a couple times already. When the season started, it was Caitlin's to lose. Even though she didn't start as great as some people expected or hoped, I think that was still the case for a little bit. Then Angel started gaining momentum with her rebounding and the double-double streak. Her touch around the rim started improving. Shout out to Tina Charles. And she even flashed a bit of a jumper, including out to three-point range. She had a huge statement game in a win against Caitlin in the Fever, where she went off for 25 and 16 on 8 for 12 shooting. But then Caitlin started figuring things out, and the Fever started using her more as a facilitator, and she went on a tear of her own. We saw her set that single games assist record and average 20 points and 12.5 assists per game in 6 games in July. And now it feels like we're even with the best yet to come. When you look at their season splits, they are much better the more rest they get, which leads me to believe they badly needed this Olympic break to get their legs back under them from their college season. And when that happens, we're set up for one hell of a finish. Based on how WNBA voters have operated in the past, if I had to bet on it, I'd say Caitlin will win the award. Her counting stats are more impressive. Her game's more aesthetically pleasing. She'll get a savior of the game bump, etc. And she'd have a hell of an argument because she's a fantastic player. But when you watch them play, it's very hard to determine who's more impressive and important to their team. And while the counting stats lean towards Caitlin, the advanced stats are all pointing at Angel. I'm not kidding. It's every single one I could find. Win shares, player efficiency rating, offensive rating, defensive rating, all the acronyms, and stats without context are pointless. But when I watch Angel play, I can feel her impact. Even when it's not always pretty, she's always involved somehow. Which is not to say Caitlin doesn't have a positive impact. In fact, the impact she has feels louder. But for better or worse, when the Fever go away from her offensively, then what? And I think that's the separator here for me up to this point. With Angel, not only is the narrative of her rebounding all her own misses silly and wildly overblown, but similar to how Caitlin is creating scoring opportunities with her passing, Angel is doing the same with her offensive rebounding. And it's a way for her to get involved even when she's not the focal point of the offense. She's also a good defender who rebounds on that end as well and creates turnovers. Caitlin also gets her share of blocks and steals, but she's a below average defender at this point in her career. I'm pretty biased towards offensive explosiveness and playmaking, but I still think Angel should be the Rookie of the Year right now, even if it's just by the slimmest of margins. I'm writing that in pencil for the time being. I'm sure this will be received well. And there's still a lot of basketball left to be played. We have to see what the Sky look like after the Mabry trade. We have to see if the Fever make any moves. There's just a lot of variables still at play, but it's awesome. And things can definitely change. The Fever may have finally figured out, hey, we have to play through Caitlin and Aaliyah as many possessions as possible so you don't have those lulls where you kind of forget Caitlin's out there. And again, this is a long enough break for both players to get their legs back. If that helps Caitlin get that three-point percentage up to 35 or 38% the rest of the way with those double-digit assists, she's going to have one hell of an argument. Overall, this is a great problem to have. We could have 2 rookies leading the league in statistical categories. That's nuts and fantastic for the league. Okay, we just talked about the importance of defense, so let's discuss who will be the Defensive Player of the Year. I talked about Asia's impact defensively earlier. She's won it the previous 2 years, but somehow seems to have a better understanding this year and is averaging career highs in steals, blocks, and defensive rebounds. Her 9.8 defensive rebounds per game would actually be a new career high in total rebounds per game for her. I'm running out of good things to say. The main concern here is voter fatigue. Next up is Napheesa Collier, again touched on her season earlier too, also putting up a career high in steals, blocks, and defensive rebounds. She's been very good defensively her entire career, but again, this is another player who's taken it to a new level. Then there's Ezi Magbagor for the Seattle Storm, elite post defender, one of the best shot blockers in the league. How she wasn't an all-star this year, I don't know. And my final candidate would be the only perimeter defender on the list, Dejanay Carrington of the Connecticut Sun. Doesn't have the stats that the others have, which is an issue when it comes to judging guard defensive play, but watch her on the court. She's locking people down. Connecticut is known for their defense, and it starts with her. In my opinion, it's going to come down to Asia and Dejanay. Napheesa and Ezi are great, obviously, but Asia does what they do at a higher level, which is the story of the WNBA right now. From there, it gets really tough because it's hard enough to evaluate defense already, and comparing a post defender's impact to a perimeter defender's impact is almost impossible. I think this one goes to Asia, but just barely. My thinking is that they each handle their assignment very well. So then I think about, what do they do when asked to play outside of their comfort zone? Who would I rather have? If Asia gets switched onto a guard on the perimeter, is she better than if DiJonai has to deal with a big in the post? For me, Asia handles her situation better, so that's the tipping point. She also erases mistakes her teammates make better than DiJonai does, if for no other reason than DiJonai plays with better defenders. Not really a knock on DiJonai, just kind of is what it is, and she is in the running for another award this year. Let's talk about the most improved player. This award is a pain in the ass because I feel like the definition is the most subjective out of all the awards. For example, Satou Sabally won it last year, but I don't know if she was improved so much as she was just finally healthy for an entire season so we could see all of her skills. That's why Kennedy Carter isn't a candidate for me here, even though I'm dying to give her an award. We knew she was talented. She just had to get a handle on some things so she could show us how talented she is. This award typically doesn't go to stars either, so although Asia, Sabrina, and Kahleah Copper all look better, I don't think they're in the running. It would be wild to win MVP and most improved in the same season. Some people are mixed on whether or not to include second-year players since a jump is expected. I think if it's a big jump, then they should get a look. Maddie Siegrist would have been in the conversation for me if she hadn't gotten hurt. Jordan Horston has improved a lot, putting up slightly better numbers than her rookie season, but doing so way more efficiently. She hit just 39% of her two-point shots last year. She's up to 55% on twos this season. Unfortunately, the Storm are stacked, so I don't think she's able to have enough of an impact to actually overcome a couple other players. One being Alana Smith of the Lynx. She actually came in third for this award last year with the Sky. New year, new team, different role, and even more improvement. She's averaging career highs in points, blocks, steals, and assists. I was a little concerned about what the Lynx would do in terms of post defense headed into the season, but she's able to defend bigs and defend them well. Probably a dark horse candidate for Defensive Player of the Year, one of 4 players in the top 10 of both steals and blocks per game. The other 3 are Asia, Breanna Stewart, and her teammate Napheesa Collier. Pretty good company to be in. Offensively, her ability to spread the floor has been a game changer for Minnesota. It's given Napheesa and Courtney Williams plenty of room to operate on drives. She's hitting nearly 44% of her threes after never hitting more than 29% before this season. She shoots it so well that I don't know how that's even possible. She's also an elite playmaker for her position. So in one single player, you have above average post defense, flamethrower three-point shooting, and solid playmaking skills. I would not be shocked to see her win this award. However, I think when all is said and done, it goes to De'Arica Hamby. A little bit crazy because she's been a 6th Player of the Year award winner and multiple-time All-Star, but what she's being asked to do this year is completely new, which is what separates her from the typical quote-unquote star that I wouldn't consider a candidate. This is the first time she's been the number 1 option on a team. To me, that change in role from elite role player to star is what separates her case from what I said earlier about Kennedy. Being at the top of the opposing team's scouting report is different. More players struggle with that leap than succeed. While the Sparks as a team have had a rough season due to youth and injuries, Hamby has been ballin'. 19 and 10, along with 3.5 assists and a steal and a half per game on 52% shooting. To get more productive and more efficient is not an easy thing to do, especially when the lineups around you are constantly changing or inexperienced. The degree of difficulty of what she's doing, along with damn near doubling her stats, seals the deal for me. Finally, from a former 6th Player of the Year in Hamby to who is going to win it this season, I will not lie, this is the hardest award to identify a winner in. I believe the criteria is simply coming off the bench fewer games than you start. That's it. Which once again eliminates Kennedy Carter, much to my dismay. She started the season coming off the bench and was a lock for this, but now she's starting, and the next game she starts will put her over the top. So I don't know what to do. The same thing is happening with a couple of other candidates in the aforementioned Jordan Horston and Ari McDonald of the Sparks, who is actually playing herself into the most improved player conversation. I've seen Sophie Cunningham's name mentioned, but to me, she's too one-dimensional. That's fine, but you really have to go nuts if that's the case, and I wouldn't say she's been going nuts. Timmy Fagbinley of the Fever was making a very strong case before she got hurt. She's back, but I think she's missed too many games. Along those same lines, Tiffany Hayes has been great for the Aces, but I think she got signed too late in the season. That one's going to be close, though. The Mystics have a couple of candidates in Aaliyah Edwards and Shatori Walker-Kimbrough. Shatori has really come on strong, putting up 14 points a game in 6 games in July, and Aaliyah is another rookie from this talented class. She's on the cusp of the game started criteria, but headed into the break, she was coming off the bench. However, I think they're going to get dinged because the Mystics have such a bad record, even though if you watch them play, they don't look that bad. Being on a struggling team also knocked Cheyenne Parker-Tyus out the running for me. The Dream have been a mess and a half. They moved Parker-Tyus to the bench to open things up in the paint and see if that helped. It didn't, but she's done well in her new role. Her numbers off the bench are actually better than when she started. So now we're down to Dorka Juhas of the Lynx, Kayla Thornton of the Liberty, and last year's winner, Alicia Clark of the Aces. Alicia has started more games than allowed so far, but I'm assuming the Aces being healthier will change that. As good as Dorka has been, she's actually the opposite of Cheyenne in that her numbers are a little inflated from the start she made when Nafisa Collier was hurt. And I love Alicia's game and the Aces, of course, but I think their inconsistency as a team, as well as her ups and downs offensively since going back to the bench, make a repeat in uphill battle for her. So by process of elimination, I think Kayla Thornton of the Liberty takes it home this year. They've obviously had a great season as a team, and Kayla's done a lot to contribute to that. Her numbers don't leap off the page, but it feels like I haven't seen her miss a wide open 3 all year. The main thing she brings and what you want from a bench player is energy and defense. You know when she's in the game because she's flying around the court making things happen as soon as she checks in. So there you have it. That one was tough. I stand by everything I said. Drop your picks in the comments if you've got them, especially if you're going to complain about mine. And with that, this has been another episode of Beyond the Arc with Brandon Silvers. Appreciate you watching, subscribing, rating, reviewing, and sharing. Hope you have a great week, and I will catch you later.